All right, welcome back to People, Passion, Process, the Art of Science. I'm very happy to have a very special guest today, Natalie De Leon, who was my postdoc advisor at Princeton. And yeah, we're gonna just do a deep dive on sort of your story and sort of lessons as a scientist. So welcome, Natalie, and why don't you give everyone a little bit of a background of your journey from, you know, as far back as you want to go to where you are now.
Okay. I think in podcast people usually say like happy to be here or something.
Sure. Only if you
Uh,
think so.
my journey. Well, I guess I've done enough of these kind of mentorship lunches and everything that maybe I have a little bit of a pat story because I think most people assume that everyone who is a scientist or is a professor, like that's what they wanted to do their whole lives, and that everything was kind of geared towards that thing. And I think in the multiverse, I'm maybe only a scientist in 20% of the
Wow.
universes or something. I don't think that it was a foregone conclusion
Huh.
at all. When I was a kid, I had very, very diverse interests. I think even in high school, I think if you looked at me, you would have seen journalism, Model UN, speech and debate,
Mhm.
a lot of nerd activities, but like
Yeah.
not necessarily that science and math focused. Partly it was because there weren't that many opportunities.
Mhm.
There were just not that many ways to do activities in science or math, and
Mhm.
I was very full of energy. Like, I think, I didn't really feel that challenged at school,
Mhm.
and had a really bad attitude about it.
Mhm.
Would try to just do my homework as fast as possible while I was still at school and not really spend any time contemplating or reflecting or anything, and, uh,
Mhm.
had maybe a little bit of a too cool for school problem.
Mhm.
But I had just this boundless energy, so I maxed out on everything else that I could do, essentially. And, when I guess the one science thread that I did have over that era was, tinkering in my house and, like,
Nice.
blowing things up in the garage, and stuff like that, and
Mostly chemistry oriented.
yeah, I mean, I think that was the thing that was kind of easy to do at home,
Mhm.
and what I liked was, the power that you had,
Mhm.
like, all you had to do was have, he was sort of like a Walter White kinda streak, but, like,
Yeah.
all you needed was just a little bit of knowledge about what was possible, and, you know oh gosh, I probably shouldn't even say this on a podcast, but I was at a Berkeley book fair in high school, middle school? Middle
Mhm.
school, and found, like, a little, snippet of the Anarchist Cookbook just
Oh God.
sitting on a used book table,
In
like,
Berkeley, that makes sense.
inverse, yeah, it was like 2 or 3 chapters, and then I just, picked it up and said, "How much for this?" And the guy behind the table just gave me a wink and let me take it.
Oh wow.
Just hands
Nice.
that to a 13-year-old,
Wow.
And,
That's funny.
so, I had a very dangerous amount of, like, tiny knowledge and used it to do things that I think, probably would in a after 2001, I think would have gotten you in real trouble, but the 90s. Um, and so I had, a little bit of a streak of tinkering, but I spent an enormous amount of energy doing not science things. And then
Mhm.
when I was in college, I wanted to go where all the smart kids were going. So
Mhm.
I I declared a chemistry major. By sophomore year, I think I realized that that was a little bit of a mistake, and I probably should have done physics. But
Mhm.
then, kind of retaking the intro classes didn't sound that appealing. So
Mhm.
I ended up with this kind of like funny um, adiabatic kind of transition over undergrad from doing mostly chemistry classes to doing mostly physics classes, but
Interesting.
graduated with a chemistry major. So it was always kind of this hybrid.
Huh.
And I was working in Dick Sayre's lab, who's a very famous physical chemist.
Mhm.
And I was, doing some crazy project. Like we we were doing laser-based mass spectros mass spectrometry of meteorites to try to
Oh,
look for like markers of complex synthesis.
oh, cool.
Yeah, it was a
So you got a good optics background from the beginning, I guess.
yeah, we did you know, somewhat serious optics. Like I think a lot of that lab would have self-identified as laser jockeys. Uh,
Hmm.
I had like finicky Nd:YAG, and I revived a dye laser that was awful.
It's
Um
huge, big things.
a big thing with like carcinogenic dye.
Oh God.
And like you have to retune it up every morning, you know, that
Uh,
kind of thing. And did some nonlinear optics. But you know, but that project was also just very weird because you took these meteorites and you had to figure out like how much of the sample do I preserve, how much do I
uh,
extract,
wow.
and like what exactly you're seeing in the end. It's a little bit, you
Wow.
know, funny. But it was a real privilege because I think I had really excellent mentorship. I had a couple of graduate students that I was working with who were great and
Mhm.
gave me a really remarkably long leash given how complicated and delicate that instrument was. You know, it was just a
Mhm.
home built mass spec. Um, and Dick Sayre is one of these people that everybody talks about how exceptional and amazing he is. And,
Mhm.
you know, and you know that even I even knew that as a 19-year-old, but I think now at this age, I can see how incredibly rare
Mm.
Dick is. Like he, even at his age now, he's in his 80s. Uh, I just saw him at Stanford last year, and he's just so excited about science. You know, you
Wow.
talk to him, and there's just like no cynicism. He's, you
Mm.
know, he just says like, "Look at this cool data that I have, Natalie," and just to have that like amount of childlike wonder
Mhm.
and enthusiasm is really inspiring.
Well, that's a lot of the game, I guess. That's a sort of interesting project. I mean, I think starting out, I'm trying to be very deliberate about projects that I can get funding for. Um, and that seems like kind of a fun sort of shot in the dark project. I mean, is that where he kind of, where did he sort of start out? Do you know? With
Oh,
his
well,
research?
okay. I mean, I think the first thing to understand about Dick's Lab is that at the time, I think there were like 50 people in the group.
Oh, wow.
It's an incredibly big group. So extremely large
So
rate
try
experiments
everything.
going on. So lots of different kinds of laser spectroscopy. But also he had this early like lab on a chip project, you know, where they were
Mhm.
trying to do microfluidics before anyone had figured out PDMS. So it's just like a crazy, it's a crazy project.
Wow. Huh.
And yeah, so there was really like a very large diversity of stuff going on in Dick's lab. I think his main interest was that he had figured out how to volatilize pretty large molecules to do
Mm.
fragmentation mass spec. That's kind of the challenge. If you have things that are sitting in a solid,
Mhm.
then how do you get stuff out
Right.
in a way that it's still intact enough that when
Yeah.
you do the fragmentation mass spec, you're really just looking at that kind of molecule
Hmm.
starting from an intact state rather than starting by fragmenting it.
Wow.
And you know, this was like a predecessor to MALDI, matrix
Okay.
assisted desorption ionization, which got the Nobel Prize.
Wow.
Um, so I think that was like it was probably mostly driven by I don't know this for sure, but
Mhm.
I believe it was driven by an idea about a new technique.
I see.
And then they had, you know, a few bits of science that you could tackle
No,
given
they
that you
have a
had that
hammer.
capability. Yeah. And I think, you know, he's always had an interest in origin of life, exobiology,
Uh-huh.
uh, and it's always been kind of one sliver of his group, if it's not, you know, it's never been like the majority, but I
Right.
think he's always had this kind of latent interest in it.
I see. So I mean, I had actually not heard this full backstory about your physics inklings because you went on to get a PhD in chemistry, right?
Chemical physics. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were like heading in that direction.
Very adiabatic transition. Yeah, I mean, I think what I wanted to do by the time I went to grad school was nanoscale transport, which
Hmm.
was, you know, a very hot topic at the time. So I went to
Hmm.
work for Hong Koong Park. And the thing that I loved about the experiment that I started on in Hong Koong's lab was that it was molecular spectroscopy,
Hmm.
but done with nanoscale transport.
Hmm.
It turns out it doesn't work at all. You you can learn, like, 1 or 2 things, but your ability to actually do things, like, quantitatively and reproducibly with these break junction, uh,
Mhm.
and this is an uncontroversial statement, like, I don't think Hong would be mad that that I'm saying it this way. We tried a few things, I think I got, like, 1 paper out of it, and then, um, was really struggling on kind of the next phase, and then we had a dill fridge that broke. It was, like, a very
Gosh.
and it was basically my, I don't know, end of 2nd year, beginning of 3rd year of graduate school or something, and Hong came in and said, "Do you still wanna do this?" I'm not that into it anymore. And, it was, and I think about that so for okay, as a graduate student, this is catastrophic, right?
Uh-huh.
Like now the thing that I came here to do my PhD on,
Yeah.
like, we're shutting down this experiment in the group. What am I gonna do?
And it
Uh,
feels like wasted effort and
yeah, like you've gone all in on learning all this stuff. I spent so much time in the clean room learning how to make
mm,
complicated structure, and with very low yield. There are many, many painful parts to this. And it seemed like just cutting well, and it was partly that it was just cutting it off and all the sunk cost, but also that he didn't have a specific alternative for me to jump onto, and
mhm.
it's sort of like, "Go figure something out." So I was really in the deep, deep desert for at least 2 years. Like,
Wow.
it was a long
Yeah.
time to be kind of flailing and struggling, and, I do have a couple of papers from that period,
Yeah.
but it was pretty random stuff, and it was just kind of like hopping on to these weird experiments, and, it didn't feel like it was going
It
anywhere. There's
takes
a
a
lot.
lot of effort to sort of squeeze some of that science out when it's forced like that.
Yes, yeah, no, exactly, and it's very painful to write a paper that you're not that excited about,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so it was very hard, and I would say that overall, I did not have a great PhD, but then what I did was I found, uh, Hong already was collaborating on, like, plasmonics,
Mhm.
basically, and I found, like, just a very small thing that people had been trying to do that they hadn't been able to do, and I
Mhm.
thought they were thinking about it the wrong way, and I just, inverted it a little bit, and
Mm.
that was enough. That was enough to be a real idea that led to something that was a nice paper and ended
Right.
up kind of the end of my PhD and brought me, like, into this whole, like, optics, photonics, nano optics world.
Mhm.
Um, and that ended up kind of setting me up for everything else. And I think in retrospect, there's no way to engineer the situation, so I wouldn't recommend it
Yeah.
as a path. But I do think the exercise of having to find my way out of the desert
Yeah.
was maybe one of the most valuable things I could have gone through.
Mhm.
And also now as a PI, watching somebody kill a project
Mhm.
where it was specifically the thing that he was famous for, like Hong had invented this
Yeah.
technique as a postdoc. It was what got him, in part, his academic job,
Mhm.
and a lot of what got him tenure,
Mhm.
he had,
Mhm.
like, he had
A lot of
continued.
momentum.
Yeah, he had other results that got him tenure, but, he had continued this project and had a handful of, like, glossy papers and,
Uh-huh.
he was quite famous for this stuff.
Yeah.
And then to really, like, take a critical look and say, "You know, I'm not that into this. I think there's not a lot more science to get out of it. I think this is a
Mm.
little bit of a dead end," and then to cut it off. Most people don't do that.
Yeah.
Most people don't have the courage.
It's
Uh,
also like putting aside your ego a bit. Maybe we can sort of unpack that attitude along with this like desert experience too, because when I rack my brain of like what it means to be a good scientist, and we can, I think, unpack like science versus engineering, and I've had a whole identity crisis myself about that. But like you're sort of the first person that comes to mind, and what does that actually mean to me? I think it's sort of what you were saying, like finding these like looking really hard at a problem and finding that people have been looking at it in a weird way. I think uh more specifically and more concretely, I think you're one of the first people that's like really insisted on having a good, like statistically significant data set. Like we used to do fab and we would make like one device with this specific geometry and one with the other. And students would like take one measurement and be like, oh, this is better than that. And that's just not how you do good science, right? You need like real trends, you need real data sets, you need to control all those unknowns. So, I mean, going back to Hong Kong, I think you also have to be dynamic, right? And know when you're in a dead end and have the confidence to kind of redirect.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there is a little bit of a thread because Hong Koon had done his PhD with Dick Sayre. So there's, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
I sort of stayed in the same academic family. But
Mhm.
I think like uh, you know, Dick would never be afraid to just charge into new territory. Like,
Mhm.
you know, he believes that you should be able to do whatever you want. So if you're
Right.
interested in something new, you're a scientist, you should be able to figure it out. You are not penned in by your particular
Mhm.
expertise. You can go gain new expertise. Like that is the point.
Mhm.
That's the point of doing scientific research.
Mhm.
That's like the fun of it. And I think Hong Kong is very has a similar spirit in that when, you know, when I showed up, he had just gotten tenure and he started this brand new neuroscience effort out of nowhere. And it really was born from the fact that he got tenure and he's like, well, what do I do now that I have all this freedom
Right.
and I can take bigger risks? And I don't want to tell his story because I'm sure that I'll make a hash of it, but it was something like he just went out for drinks with Sebastian Sung. And
Okay.
like I bet I could do some neuroscience. Yeah, I'm sure I just made a hash of that, but and he and you know, and he just like courageously, and that's not easy. Like
No.
it's hard to even convince people to give you money for stuff like that, right? Like
Right.
no
That's the
expertise.
harder part. That's
And
also supposed to be what academia is about, right? Like that's supposed to be what tenure is for,
yeah.
is to like have that stability to make those. So it's cool that, people are actually doing that and not just like staying in their comfort zone.
No, that's right. And so I think I got like a lot of that training from both of those labs.
Mhm.
But then I think also this, you know, this uh being able to take a critical look at what you're doing,
Mhm.
like saying like it is time to cut this off.
Yeah.
It's really not easy.
Yeah.
And I can see now if I just look across, you know, academic science, very few people make that decision. Like
Yeah.
they will really just run out a topic
Mhm.
forever and ever and ever because they can keep on getting papers because they're famous for it
Right.
and never think hard about, is this really the best use
Yeah.
of my brain power? Is this really like the way that we're going to do cool stuff?
Right.
So I think that was a very important, lesson.
Mhm.
And then yeah, and then I guess the last step of my training was then I did a postdoc in Misha Lukin's group.
Mhm.
And the entry point was that we were supposed to like put NV centers next to these plasmonic resonators. And that was a bad idea. But the slightly better idea was we could put them in nanophotonic cavities and then and try to build out quantum networks. And I had intended it to be kind of a mini postdoc. Like I was
Mhm.
just going to hang out, learn something cool, and I always wanted to go back to California. So the
Mhm.
plan was to go back to California and do a real postdoc. But then I met my husband, and he was still in the middle of grad school, so he had to finish it out for a few years, and
Mhm.
it was going to be a long PhD.
It's a hard experiment.
It was a hard experiment, yeah. And so then I think like Misha doesn't love it that I say it this way because it sounds like I just stayed for a boy or something,
All right.
and not to stay in this exciting lab. But obviously that was a great lab to
Mhm.
stay in. And
Misha's another person that's sort of, I mean, really a theorist that just turned into a really amazing experimentalist of sorts, or at least facilitated that.
Yeah, I think Misha definitely, it was like another model and another lesson in how you could be really courageous,
Mhm.
like just charge into new territory.
Right.
And I think the thing that I really learned from Misha was he just has this incredible creativity
Mm.
and an instinct for things that are interesting.
Mm.
So he has this very good like antenna
Uh-huh.
for like hunting around for new opportunities and then kind of opening up a new frontier
Mm.
by, figuring something out that people had kind of neglected or figuring out how
Right.
to put a couple of pieces together.
Mm.
And the experiments are always just insanely ambitious,
Right.
at a really impressive scale. And I think like he deeply cares about advancing the science.
Mhm.
Like everybody in his lab works very, very hard, but he is not, and I try to do this in my lab. He never writes down the hours. I think he doesn't even know what hours
Yeah.
people, people are in there, like
Yeah.
it's different for there are other labs where everybody works super hard and
Mhm.
the PI is kind of a taskmaster and goes in and whips up the troops and everything. And
Mhm.
Misha, it's really just all about the science. You come to his office, you have some data, you go and
Mhm.
argue about the data, and then you go back to your lab and you try to make the experiment work. And then because he is not an experimentalist by training, as an experimentalist in your group, you have this incredible free reign to pick new directions and try different things. Like
It's awesome.
he doesn't have a strong enough opinion about the parameter space to say, here's
Mm.
the exact way we're going to do it, and put in like a big penalty for
Yeah.
you did it a different way that disagreed with his experimental intuition, then that you're really
Mhm.
paying for it. Or it's really just he wants the science to happen. He has some ideas. Uh,
Mhm.
he's put together this creative picture and he has a vision of where it could go.
Mm.
But like um, you know, on Jeff's experiment, he was supposed to put atoms next to plasmonic nanowires. That was the original version of his project.
Oh, okay.
And and then the two of us together with a few other scientists in the group, it was Brendan Shields and Alexei Akimov, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, but we just had a little journal club reading group where we taught ourselves photonic crystal design by
Okay.
reading through John Joannopoulos' book. So it was really just we met every week or every week
Self-taught.
a little while and then just argued about this we had read the chapter and then we argued
Mhm.
about it and then built up the simulation formalism and everything.
Wow.
So that was it. And then we were just like, okay, I guess we'll just start making these photonic crystals now.
Wow.
And we didn't tell Misha.
Well, that's amazing.
It didn't seem like something he really needed to know. And then
Mhm.
by the time we were already doing it and we told him, he didn't act like, oh, I can't believe you went in this different direction. He was just like, this is great.
Just do your job.
This is exactly in line with my vision.
Yeah.
And it would be impossible for anyone to do that in my lab. I
Yeah.
think if they were like, I started making photonic crystals and you didn't even say I could go into the fab.
Yeah.
So I think it was a special time in the lab because it was it was still at a relatively small size,
Mhm.
but there were a lot of resources, an enormous number of ideas, a lot of leash basically to
Yeah.
go try things, to go in kind of crazy new directions. And that was like that was an incredible piece of training, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so maybe we can transition a little bit to this Tantalum saga. So uh I'll send a link to the recent Nature paper, but now have millisecond T1s consistently for um transmon qubits. And I think, I don't want to be overly hyperbolic, but I feel like um your approach to like materials engineering was a lot of what has driven this progress. I think there's one of the nice things about superconducting circuits is they're very flexible in terms of the parameters you can engineer and couplings and all of this stuff. And it's been a lot of progress for just like making qubits that are less sensitive to different kinds of noise, but I mean, like the geometry of the qubits that you've been working with hasn't really changed much, right? You've just engineered the materials. So I think there's a fun story. I mean, we could go into all the details, but maybe like a quick synopsis, like highlighting sort of where were the like key turning points that drove this progress, because lots of people have been thinking about qubits, but I think you're first person to be like, let's actually treat these materials, you know, like engineering what anyway.
Um, yeah, well, okay. I guess there's like lots of pieces to the story. The
Yeah.
first is that it's I still don't really see it as what I do for a living. The superconducting qubit stuff is this eccentric hobby midlife crisis or something, just like this funny thing. And my, if I interrogate my internal states and say like what do I actually identify as a scientist, it really is, quantum metrology
Mm-hmm.
with NV centers and diamond and
Mm-hmm.
and diamond stuff. Like that's what I think of as the core of what I do and where I have like real expertise. So I think the starting point is really there because I, as you know, because you were there for part of this era, spent all this time trying to make good NV centers near diamond surfaces
Mm-hmm.
for nanoscale sensing. And that was like this big graveyard problem. Lots of people had seen that there was this real issue that you couldn't even see shallow NV centers. Like you tried to bring them within a few nanometers and they would all just kind of die. And the ones that you could see had really lousy coherence time. So there's just a general surfaces are bad and have a lot of defects kind of problem. And I think at the time the main approach was just kind of like, let's try something, measure our NV center,
Mm-hmm.
try another thing, measure our NV center, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
let's just try to randomly shoot in the dark
Mm-hmm.
of like parameter space, like stick it in a plasma, put it in a furnace or whatever, and then measure the NV centers. And I was very unsatisfied with that as an approach and kind of went down this deep dive of doing surface spectroscopy, just trying to figure out, like there's got to be a better way to figure out what's going on.
Right.
A priori, it's not obvious that any of these techniques should really give you useful information,
Mm.
but let's just try a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just try like 15 of them and then see if
Mm-hmm.
anything gives you something that correlates with what you see from the qubit measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up being a very successful project in that we were able to increase the coherence time of NV centers near the surface by
Mm-hmm.
1 or 2 orders of magnitude, depending on what metric you use,
Mm-hmm.
and even just seeing them within a few nanometers.
Yeah. They exist.
Yeah. So I ran around giving that talk for a few years. That was like, look, if you just have this kind of large scale muscular program where you really go and track down what all the different potential sources of loss are, sources of noise in this case, then and then you start peeling back the layers, that you can actually make somewhat deterministic progress on this topic. Like you have to just do these shots in the dark. And just sociologically, wherever I went, people would sort of say like, there are these other noise problems.
Yeah.
Like in quantum dots, we have this charge noise that we haven't really figured out, and or in ion traps, we see anomalous heating. We think it has to do with surfaces. Maybe you can come and solve those. And I would always just like shut that down and say like, look, it's not like my passion is surface. I'm not a surface scientist. My aim is not to go around fixing everyone's surfaces. I don't want to get into, those are your problems. You can copy what I did and solve your own problems. But what I really want to do is this nanoscale sensing.
Right.
And then I think it was just like proximity to Andrew Houck's lab. And we were also having a lot of conversations with Rob Scholkoff and Michelle Deveray, leading up to forming this Department of Energy NQI Center. And I just started listening a little bit more to what people had actually tried in superconducting qubits. I guess just you understand this background, but I should probably just explain for whoever might listen to this, that the background of the field is that the coherence time and lifetime of superconducting qubits had gone up by many, many orders of magnitude from the late 90s up until about 2010, when Rob's group invented the 3D transmon, and they just kind of blew up the qubit, and it had very few, it had very like little sensitivity to noise, and they got to around 100 microseconds, and then there was essentially no progress after that. Like there were a few weird qubits, but they were qubits that you can't drive so easily, things that can't really scale into large scale processors. So at 100 microseconds, it's about where industry is still kind of stuck, that's where all the large scale processors are. So because it was like in 2019, we started this, we had this like tiny NSF program. And what I was supposed to do was just like surface spectroscopy on some qubits to show you how completely unserious this project. It was me and Bob Kava, because we were like, I bet we can take a run at this. And we were so unserious that we added Andrew as an unfunded collaborator.
I remember. Do you remember this time where I feel like you were like, how do you make your qubits? And I sketched out like we deposit this layer. And that was back in the day where we were like debating whether the aluminum, like the islands were going to be aluminum. So there's just like aluminum oxide everywhere. And it was sort of unclear which was better. But it was just like, I think that's a really interesting origin story, because now you guys have the best qubits, I think, in the world, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think that's uncontroversial.
okay. But it's really, it's like, keep going, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think like I didn't have a really strong idea for like what the whole research program should look like, but I had a very strong opinion that I am sure these guys are limited by fabrication residue. Like if they haven't even tried to get rid of it. And everyone I talked to in the field, when I would say this, they just looked at me like I was a crazy person.
Yeah.
Like,
well, you can't see with your eyes, so
yeah. I mean, I'm pretty careful in the fab.
Yeah.
And and just nobody had looked, basically. But then also, if you just, there was some very nice work by mostly by Rob's group trying to parameterize the problem, where it was pretty clear that you had two-level system loss. It was very clear that it was surface related. And of course, there's a giant pile of data from the community. But I think like the nicest data set is really this thing that Chen Wang put together, where you really see this linear dependence with size. And I think the key thing for me about that plot is there's lots of different qubits in there. There's like titanium nitride and aluminum and niobium, all these different materials. So my feeling was anything that's different about these materials, you guys are not at a point where you can see it. So that can't be your problem. Your problem's got to be something that's on top. On top or below. Those are the options. And even below, like some of these qubits were on sapphires, some of them were on silicon, some of them were on grades of silicon. So my strong bias was, if you have a few nanometer thick layer of hydrocarbons, the loss tangent of stuff is like 10 to the minus 3, and participation ratios are around 10 to the minus 3. So there's your quality factor of 1,000,000. So I bet this is it. So all we have to do is go in and like clean very aggressively. And then Bob Kava just pointed out that niobium is this terrible material, because if you try to chemically process it, it's got all these terrible oxides. It's very hard to control. Like you get a different set of oxides, even if the humidity in the room is a little bit different. And he had spent some time in the 80s and 90s studying that some of these oxides are even magnetic. It's just like it's a big mess. It's really bad. So what we did was we just tried tantalum, because it's superconducting with a reasonable TC. It's a very robust material. It has this, stoichiometric, kinetically limited oxide, so we could do all kinds of stuff to it. And, okay, I didn't know very much at the time. I think if you like Google searched it, you could find a bunch of people talking about how tantalum doesn't tarnish or whatever. Like it's all this like old school kind of stuff. But it was a little bit of a shot in the dark. And then the very first tantalum qubit anyone made, which was like an undergrad in the group, had a T1 that was longer than anything Andrew's group had ever made.
Yeah.
Um, so then, there was a big first signal, and that was around 100 microseconds. So we had basically marched right up to the state of the art with the very first thing. And then beyond that, there was a lot of surface spectroscopy to figure out, like, is our processing really doing what we think it's doing? And we did a deep dive in, like, are we accidentally contaminating the substrate when we whatever, when we dice, there's like all these things that you could introduce
Right.
problems. And then also just learning how to do good fabrication on this new material, because it's a
Right.
refractory metal. It's actually, it's very chemically resistant. So you tried to do normal etching and you get all this surface roughness. So you kind of had to figure out how to retool all of our etching, retool what we were doing to get nice smooth surfaces. And that was like the first result out of the gate was this 300, 400 microsecond T1, which seemed like a pretty big signal, right? It wasn't just like a marginal 10 or 15%.
It's like an order of magnitude on what we had before about
Inside the lab. Yes.
Yeah, within the lab.
Yeah. And then, a good factor of 3 above the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So then so I think of that as the actual beginning of the project, because before that we had very naive ideas, and we had strong biases, but not real science, basically. And then I think I spent the next year kind of convincing everyone that we actually had to do a quantum metrology project. That was, that our path forward was not going to be, let's continue shooting from the hip with our materials intuition, but that what we had to do was actually go in and, define a set of measurements where we could actually measure quantitatively all of the different sources of loss, rank order them, and then tackle them in order. And, and there's a big, long story, and lots of students and lots of postdocs contributed to it. And we had a few shots at this that were bad. And but I think in the end, we now have like a very good pipeline for figuring out what the material is and what all of the failure modes are, and then getting a clear dielectric loss measurement and parameterizing it into all of the different microscopic sources, like how much is quasi-particles, how much is vortices, how much is packaging loss and weird stuff like that, and then how much of it's two-level systems. And the end of that whole project was, we now know that for our state-of-the-art tantalum on sapphire devices, it is 99 or even 99.9% two-level system dominated. So you don't have to think about anything else. But that what we could see is about a third of that loss was coming from some kind of surface layer, but 2/3 was coming from the underlying bulk substrate, which I think, if you were just doing qubit measurements, there would be no way to tell the difference between these two things. So the fact that we could see that very clearly gave you a really clear deterministic path to improvement, which is, let's either change the grade of sapphire, anneal it, try to process it to get rid of whatever the heck this two-level system defect is. None of that worked.
Or throw out the material entirely.
Yeah, or throw out the material entirely, and let's like now go and start to look at other things that we have some intuition could be like lower dielectric loss materials. And we managed to get some high quality silicon from this supplier, and again, like the first few things that we made actually looked really lousy, but they looked so lousy that it was clear that we weren't interrogating what we thought we were, or what we wanted to. It was, there's just some crazy surface layer. So there was some heroics on the material science side to try to figure out how to grow tantalum on silicon without getting it a lossy interface layer. But then once we did that, we, again, it was sort of like first light on it was millisecond. I think like 900 microseconds or something else was the first qubit. And then, there was just a little bit of iteration on silicon processing and how we do the tantalum deposition. And we had some reproducibility issues at the very beginning, but it was probably only a couple months of process optimization. But before we really kind of finished that result. And then the last step on the most recent paper is that the junctions were still being deposited and fabricated the way that we had always done it. Like there was the one part of the process we had never touched, other than doing some careful imaging to make sure we weren't doing anything catastrophic. And again, my strong intuition is if you have all these weird losses, it's definitely like hydrocarbon contamination because you just haven't spent any time thinking about it. So we just built a new evaporator tool that was ultra high vacuum, had filters in the lines, and little things like I go around to other people's e-beam evaporators and they have plastic tubing and they're and like, in the semiconductor industry, this is just like unheard
Yeah,
of.
yeah, yeah.
You'd never do that. So just like standard discipline that we largely learned from the diamond space, like when we were doing high
Mm,
pure processing in diamond. This is what you have to do.
yeah.
So and again, it was first light on the junctions out of this tool was we were at lifetime limited coherence time. So there wasn't even that much kind of iterative
Yeah.
process.
Wow. Yeah, I mean it's a wonderful story. I think maybe in the last few minutes that we have, there's some like let's zoom back out and just think high level lessons that you would give to future scientists. I mean, I think we all have different journeys to, throughout our career, and we got a good picture of yours. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but like what are some like tangible lessons that you can give to the next generation that, I don't know, like advice for how to be successful in science? I don't know, open-ended.
Yeah. Uh my friends joke that I'm trying to start a cult um about about this exact topic. So I'm sorry if we're giving you the cult pitch.
That's okay.
But uh I I think my biggest piece of advice to people, and I don't know if everyone can make good on this because maybe it's like just how your brain works or it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's extremely important to keep your book straight.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is for everything that you're doing, you have like a column that is labeled with you're doing this because you think you need to keep other people happy, or you're doing this because it's important for maintaining your career and professional standing, or you're doing this for community service, or you're doing it because it's furthering your goals.
Mm-hmm.
And the key thing is your goals are a different column from all of those other things. And I think in science, but in academic science especially, is very easy to get lost in what everyone else thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's partly because our jobs are very um, broad, right? Like you're doing research, but you're also teaching and fundraising and uh,
A
you
lot of
know
hats.
and training your students and participating in your research community. So there's like a lot of pieces to it. And I think a lot of people can get really lost in markers of success or trying to chase fame. Like they start to think that their job is to make Nature papers,
Mm-hmm.
for example, and that was never your job. You're- I mean, it's something that goes inside the column of like
Yeah.
professional upkeep or something. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's important because then it makes it easier to recruit students
Mm-hmm.
who are good because then they see that it's a productive lab and and there's some amount of like churn where you need some glossy papers, you need some
Mm-hmm.
nice, you need some funding, awards are good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think people get really lost in thinking like the point is the awards
Mm-hmm.
or the point is the fundraising or the point
Mm-hmm.
is the glossy papers. The point is the science,
Yeah.
right? And you have to like figure out for yourself what you think your science goals are,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go and advance those goals because otherwise I don't know how to live if
Yeah.
otherwise you're just like buffeted around by trends and what everyone else thinks
Yeah.
they do.
But you kind of
Uh,
have to have faith that all the other stuff will kind of fall in line with those. I mean, if you're really chasing the science goals properly, then all that other stuff kind of comes along.
Well, I think that's the key thing about the columns, though. I don't think my message is you don't do any of that stuff,
Mm,
right? The message is that you are clear in your head about why you're doing it and you don't get confused about how
mm,
much effort you should spend on it. Like doing things for other people is not a bad use of your time. You
yeah.
know, it's good to be a good citizen. It's good to keep your colleagues happy. But the
Hmm.
point is, uh, if you get lost and think that that's the only thing that you should be doing, then it's very easy to lose sight of the other columns,
Yeah.
right? If you don't label things, then you
Mhm.
sort of you spend too much time on things that you shouldn't be spending time on.
Mhm.
And you could just decide for yourself, like, this is the column that I want to live in. And
Yeah.
that's totally fine if you've made that decision for yourself. But I think a lot of people aren't even thinking about it in terms where they're making a decision. They're effectively just kind of
Yeah.
letting currents pull them wherever they're going to get pulled.
Yeah.
Uh, so, I certainly look, I have papers that I publish. I don't want to publish them. And it's because I have a student that needs to graduate, and we
Mhm.
need to figure out how to take this and package it in a thing
Yeah.
because the person needs a paper, and it would make my life easier if I didn't do it. And it's not necessarily advancing my big,
Yeah.
ambitious science goals, but we have to do it because I can't just like screw people's careers
Yeah.
just because it doesn't advance my personal goals. But I think the key is if you think about it in those terms, like, okay,
Mhm.
this is a thing we have to do because this person's career is important and they're going to use it
Mhm.
as a stepping stone to go do other things. It changes the scope, right?
Yeah.
And it just like the like what you want to do with that thing, because now you're not hinging all of your science on it.
Mhm.
Uh, and similarly, things like I think like awards is maybe the clearest
Mhm.
picture. That there are people who get very obsessed with awards and they start thinking about the politics of awards and how,
Yeah.
like obviously the Nobel Prize, right? This
Mhm.
is the thing
Mhm.
that people spend a crazy amount of brain share thinking
Right.
about how they're going to get a Nobel Prize, why other people get Nobel Prizes, who they
Yeah.
can be up to, like how they can make an argument about the scope of their science that differentiates enough from
Yeah.
other people are doing that there's a clear circle. People spend crazy amounts of time talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's really like, look, I get it. I understand why people are so obsessed with it. It's because it's one of the very few things that you knew about when you were 3 years old.
Yeah. And
It's
it's
like,
something like non-scientists know how to be
yeah,
like, oh, that means you're a good scientist.
that's right. It's like Oscars, being an Olympic athlete, and
Uh-huh.
Nobel Prizes.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but it's clearly not our job,
Mhm.
right? And it shouldn't be the thing that you try to hinge your happiness on.
Mm.
So, like, if you get awards, for sure, it is helpful for your career. It
Mhm.
helps you attract funding and talent so that you can do other stuff. But you should really see it as a vehicle
Yeah.
by which you accomplish the things that you really want to do in life. And I
Mhm.
think I think if people are good at keeping those things straight, maybe it's partly about being good at science because
Mhm.
then you actually like strategically plan things so that you're advancing the science. But I think it's also maybe I think everyone would be happier.
Which is like, what is being good at science?
Oh, well,
Uh,
okay. I
Abstract, like high level.
abstractly,
Yeah.
abstractly. I think there are only two defensible answers. I don't know if this is too close to like a Subway hot take or something.
Whatever.
But I think one defensible answer is that you advance the knowledge of mankind.
Mhm.
That's it, right? So like either you discover something new, you show that there's a thing that we can do that we didn't know we could do, like a new
Mhm.
technology, or you answer a question that
Mhm.
we didn't have. But it's basically like you draw a circle around everything that people know today.
Mhm.
If by the end of your career you have expanded that circle in any way, that counts as being good at science.
Okay.
Uh, the second
Nice.
answer that I think makes sense, and you could tool your career around completely, is training good scientists,
Mm.
which is a little bit recursive and gets you into a weird loop.
Right.
But
Right.
but I think there's clearly it's a little bit stupid because it sounds like you're teaching fifth grade science fair scientific method or
Well,
something.
I mean, it took me a while to realize that that's what research is. Like,
It is what research is,
yeah.
yes. There is actually,
Embarrassingly long amount of time.
but I think there's like a deep core philosophy
Mhm.
that in order to advance the capabilities and quality of life and whatever,
Mhm.
enhance the amount of stuff we know,
Mhm.
that here's how you do it, right? It's a recipe.
Yeah.
And we sort of take for granted because modern life is what it is.
Yeah.
But most people don't agree with most people don't agree with this, right? It's like a
Yeah.
thing that you have to be taught. It's not natural. People
Hmm.
believe that knowledge can come from many different sources and they have different ways of parsing it. The
Hmm.
scientific method is a clear philosophical position.
It's like one of the
That
greatest inventions of all time.
yeah, and you have to teach people how to do it.
Yeah.
Like and it's hard because they think they know what it is, and then
Yeah.
they really get into it and they do not
Yeah.
know what it is. And I think even among PhD scientists, the number of
Yeah.
PhD scientists that are really truly trained in hypothesis testing,
Yeah. It's
not
funny because it's a full bookend. Because I would say that that's like one of the first things you learn in like middle school science,
yes,
right? Like,
elementary school.
yeah, it's just like you learn about it in this sort of very bland way, right?
Make a
But then
poster board.
yeah, but then it really like comes full circle, and then you spend your career doing this,
Yes,
and
but you have to really be committed to it because
yeah,
it's very easy to kind of slap together some data, put a veneer on it,
yeah,
and then publish a paper. And then you think
mhm,
the point of this was just the paper.
yeah,
But you really kick the tires?
yeah,
Did you really take your own data seriously and your own models for that data seriously and
mhm.
define other ways to test it?
And
And
throw your ego out of it and just let the data do the you know talking for itself.
exactly. So I think those are the two pieces, and you can choose which one. You can do both.
Yeah.
I kind of think if you're doing the first piece, you automatically do the second piece
Hmm. Hmm.
because the way to train good scientists is by doing good science.
Yeah. It's
Um,
like an
but
apprenticeship model.
yeah, it is exactly a 18th century apprenticeship, where you learn to do science from from a particular human
Yeah.
who does science the way that they do it. And I think, keeping that philosophical stance alive
Yeah.
is actually quite important.
Well, in closing, thank you for doing that with me. Like I learned a lot from you. I still do. And it's been a pleasure to kind of still be in the game and do my own science. But also, constantly be impressed with what you're putting out in Princeton. It makes me really proud to have been a member of your lab, and I'm excited to see where things go from here. So thanks
I'm
again.
excited to see what you do too. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's fun.
I
So
hope you edit this down severely.
maybe.
We'll see.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Matthias.